So we're going to lead out with just context setting from the panelists themselves. And so just want to know a little bit about what the position of user research is within your organizations, in particular as it sits between those disciplines, product research and design. So I think we'll start with you, Abhi.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So for us, research is definitely very strategic, right? It's not a tactical thing. It's not a service. They are like true stakeholders. So they said they're a peer group to design and product within a larger product organization.
Lindsay, why not?
So at Freshbooks, we don't have dedicated researchers, but there's a lot of research that's done. It's done by a team of the product manager and the UX designer.
Okay, Zabrina.
So at Shopify, we have embedded product managers in all our product lines, and the objective is to kind of almost pair a researcher to a few PMs at any given time.
All right, at Wattpad, we have dedicated user experience research expertise, but research is paired up with design as they are embedded within their respective squads, but that's where it's happened, but it does span across the design and product function as well.
Which is delightful because we got user research is a dedicated role and user research is not a dedicated role. Fight. That's it. My job here is done. No, okay. So moving on. Just while we're, again, doing context setting around how you all think about research, I'm just interested in if you have an aha moment, the point in your career, because we've got some good long storied careers here, at which user research became a prominent part of the way you think about building product. And again, I'm going to go to you first, Abhi, just in that context.
Yeah, so for me, it was almost 11 years ago. I was graduating out of B school, and I attended this innovation seminar. It's a 20-minute video. It was a 2020 segment, like one of the shows that comes on TV with Tim Russert back in the day, and they were showing a bunch of IDEO engineers in like building the future of shopping cart. And that just watching that process was eye-opening for me. Like that was definitely an aha moment. And so after I graduated, I actually went to Frog Design because I really wanted to do product, but I really wanted to do product by putting consumers in the middle versus just using data, right?
Zabrina, what about you?
So I think for me it was when I was at Bitmoji. Research was always an important thing in my products, and again, like use the data. But at Bitmoji, we were building an app from scratch, and when we had gotten like partway there, we decided to bring in a bunch of university students and just observe them. We didn't want to even ask them questions. We wanted to see how they use our app, because I think we had a lot of implicit bias and thinking like this is the best user flow. Like we definitely have killed it, and everyone's going to know how to share. So just by watching them and like observing and seeing where their pain points were, we ended up changing a bunch of the design, a bunch of the flows, and it really impacted the future of the app and I think the success of the app. And since then, again, echoing Abhi, I think like putting the user at the center has been super important to me.
That's great. Andrew, I know you've got a slightly different take on this.
Yeah, I've been doing user research for over 20 years, but I had a real aha moment like a couple months ago. At Wattpad, we did a hackathon, and it was really a mini sprintathon where we had mini squads form up, and they all did their own user research and usability testing on their concepts. And the aha moment was like, it was new to some people still. So even like after 20 years, user research and getting users at the center of the process is still something that's really new to a lot of people. For us, it's really obvious because we've crossed that chasm, but it's still new to people, and we're still explaining to people what it is.
So that leads perfectly to the next question, which is really the crux of this panel. Should we do user research?
Yes.
That's really not it. I think we have a good enough consensus on that one. We can move on. So Zabrina, tell me about the benefits of a dedicated user research role within your organization as it relates to rather than having it done by product or design.
So what's been really beneficial by having these embedded researchers on our team is that we work very closely and collaboratively together during different stages. It could be like when we're in the blue sky, early stage thinking, and they really help at that point to figure out the strategic direction that our product should take. We work on it together, and we actually use the research that they compile to create the KPIs and build a product brief together. And so that's what we use to build the argument and get resources and prove that we should do this product versus any of the other hundreds that we're trying to get done at any given time. So that collaborative process and having them embedded in the team is super helpful in that.
Just a follow-on question to that, and I'm interested if we can weave this into some of the other discussions, but the outputs of that research team, are you getting data back, or are they doing synthesis? So are you getting the data followed by their interpretation, or are you actually working from the raw data yourselves?
So it depends on the project and the stage of the research that we're in or the product that we're in. So we've had an example where it's at the end of a product, and then I'm getting the synthesis and a deck back and understanding how merchants are actually using the product. When it's the earlier stage, we work on it together and we kind of figure out, okay, what do we do? And we work on the raw data together.
Great. So here's where the conflict starts. Lindsay, why don't we need
Yes,
user
Tom.
researchers?
Sorry, what was that?
Why don't we need user researchers?
Well, so I think, so research needs to happen, it's critical, but you don't always have that luxury. You know, I would love to have like a whole research team like digging in and finding insights for me, but like not all companies have that luxury. Like Shopify made like $1 bazillion last quarter, and they have like a team of researchers looking into who knows what, flying cars. But the reality is that not all companies have that. And if you think about what a company is, or at least a company you want to work for, it's really grow or die. It's sustain. I don't want to work for a company that sustains. That's boring. And so if you don't have a dedicated research team, you need to be really, really scrappy. And therefore, as a PM and as a designer, you need to learn how to do good quality research really quickly, because that is really important for your business.
But I think we have to balance that with, we can't have the luxury of bias, right? And that's one of the things that I really find valuable about researchers is that they bring that, they're objectively curious and they're, conditioned to understand the methods and the techniques to make sure that we have that objective lens in terms of what we're doing.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. But I think that you can learn about how to be unbiased, and I think that's a journey that we all go through to try to improve ourselves. But I think also as a company, we don't have the luxury or I guess maybe take a step back, it's like sometimes researchers are completely out of touch with the business, and therefore you need other people to kind of bring them back to that, so that the insights that they get from their projects can actually be turned into products that people use that make money.
But that's why having an embedded researcher actually, like they're working with the people who are making the business goals and the product goals, and you work so closely together. But I know it seems like we made $1 bazillion and we have 30 researchers and we have 60 PMs, but that's across 3,000 people. So really, like having 30 researchers like allows us to scale and determine, like, of these hundreds of products, of these thousands of like features we want to do, how do we execute it, and which ones do we choose?
So let me just pick up on that. You've got 30 researchers. I know that the teams are smaller in these other organizations. And while we're talking about bias doesn't just come from our ability to execute on these. It comes from implicit and subconscious bias. And so is there a way that you can overcome that, Abhi, maybe in terms of like a 3-person research team? You're not going to have inbuilt diversity in that team. So how do you overcome subconscious bias in that?
So I think you really have to kind of like take a step back here, right? Because I think we're not disagreeing on the fact that we do need research as a function, right? What we're arguing about is, can we have the luxury of a dedicated person or a team or whatever that might be? So I think that's something we can agree on, right? The harder thing about this is, at some point you also research needs to be incredibly strategic. Their job is to really impart empathy throughout that entire organization, right? It's not about like, hey, can you go out and tell me like if this feature has a resonance? Like that's a very small piece of what research could do for you. But like overall, what you really need research to do is like really, really drive a consistent view of the customer, a consistent view of like what are the problems you want to solve, like how you want to solve it potentially. Give people, empower them with the tools that they can take back in their day-to-day work, and then do something about that.
So are you sort of calling back to Sam's opening talk today, where she was talking about bigger picture research and really understanding the landscape over the A/B testing and getting products into the hands? How is particularly with the work that you're doing right now. You're bringing a new product to market. You can't tell us what it is, but you're trying to do some background research. It's kind of, you're living in iPad land, but unlike Steve Jobs, you don't believe that you have all the answers. Is that what the research team is doing right now?
Yeah, so I think we definitely do like conventional, like whatever we call conventional research. So first of all, like the conference is called UXR. I just want to be clear, like UX is often associated with design or software. For us, like research definitely goes well beyond it. For the product that we're working on, it has a physical component, it has a software component, it has a retail component. And then on top of it, you're talking about like human variability. Like we're not trying to build one product that scales to, you know, 1 billion people. We're actually trying to build product that actually fit to individual people. So it's incredibly custom. So now, if you just put that into context, and the product we're working on is also a product that doesn't exist. I know it sounds crazy, right? Like flying cars.
Flying
Like,
cars.
Yeah. Right? So from that perspective, like we're absolutely in like new territory. Like we don't know a lot of things. So research is integral for us to be able to discover. So early on, like research for us was very much like, hey, can you help identify, after we had a educated marketing target, can you help us identify a design target, right? And once we had that, like, okay, what are the insights that we've like culled from that design target that helped us actually build tenets? From those tenets, we had design languages that like kind of showed up into our ID work, industrial design work, on the design itself, on the software side. From there, we had an MVP, an hypothesis for like what we wanted to do. And we did all of that work. We started building the product. And now research is working, you know, like we do the usability, like all those like drills for sure, but they're working on a day-to-day basis, really understanding like how this product fits now. Now we had this hypothesis, like how do we iterate through the hypothesis?
So research for you is all the way through the life cycle. It's ethnographic all the way through to the detail points.
Absolutely, and I would add one more thing, right? For a product like ours, where we have a hypothesis for a target and a hypothesis for a product, and now we're validating to some extent, a big part of research is also helping us land the target, eventual target, out of that hypothesis, right? It's not just like, we did that work one time, now we just like talk to those people, and we build the product. No. Now we're going to build a product, but like we also have a vision, a very clear vision of what we want to do. Like, how do we want to make a change in this world? And along those lines, what portion of that target really is going to be our customer, like our ambassador in some shape or form? So it's going to be incredibly important for us to have research all the way through, not just to launch, but beyond launch, getting to a product market fit. Research is an integral part.
I just want to just touch on what Abhi was saying and totally contradict what I just said previously, saying that researchers can be totally out of touch with business, which is partially true. But I think in the kind of line of work that you're in where there's a hardware component, you know, you're probably designing products that are going to hit the market in 2019, 2020, and there's a significant amount of risk there. Because if you get it wrong, you just burned a lot of cash. And so I think that the role of having a dedicated research team is critical, because if you get the wrong problem or you don't know who you're building for wrong, you're basically screwed. So go research, yes.
So do you think we're not screwed if we launch something or release something to our users that doesn't work for them?
No, you're not screwed, because software can change really quickly. Hardware, not so much, or at least not in terms of the development cycles that we have currently today in the world.
100%, but don't you think it helps build trust more with your users if you can get them something that like delights them in the experience before taking something away that you're like, oh shit, what do I do?
But let's go with the fear of product. Often when we engage researchers, we don't want to hear what we don't want to hear. So there's certain business goals that are set, and sometimes you actually don't have control over what those business goals are. And so I think the focus on detailed research is sometimes because you don't want to take that step back and do what the fuck are we doing? Because maybe you'll end up finding that you're in the wrong business entirely. Andrew, I'm interested in how research, is it full end-to-end? Are you doing full early stage, like ethnographic market discovery work right now, or is research at Wattpad more of a feature and incremental?
Well, so first I want to clarify and make the statement, like research is not a luxury. Research is something that is going to happen on your product no matter what. Either you do it proactively or you're going to find out in market. In some way, shape, or form, you're going to find that user feedback. At Wattpad, We do a mix of methods across the life cycle. In particular, we're doing a lot more in terms of upfront ethno and co-creation with users to really have them lead us. And to Abhi's point before, it's a lot of it is about fine-tuning who our target user is and iterating through that.
So when is it okay to ignore the researchers?
When is it okay to ignore the researchers?
Yeah.
Did you just ask that question?
I totally did, yeah.
I'll say it's relative to risk, right? So what's on the line? If you are planning a hardware product that takes a longer time to iterate on, then ignoring the researchers is at your own perils, right? If it's something that is easier for you to revector on, it's a balance between the outcome that you're really what you're trying to get out of it.
So you gave an answer which means you do sometimes ignore the research that comes out of your team. Is that true?
I did not say that. To be clear.
Would anybody else like to own up to that? Because I certainly do myself. So Lindsay, how about you?
Yes, you need to ignore research, some research. And the reason for that is that, yes, there's risk. I totally agree with Andrew about that. But the other piece is like, what is the strategic direction of your company? So like, for example, just to be concrete about that. So Freshbooks is an invoicing app for freelancers that sell their time, so service-based business. So when I hear things about people that sell physical things, like Shopify people, I don't care about that. I don't want to hear about it because we're not building for that customer. And any minute of my time spent thinking about that, or a developer's time spent saying that, that's wasting time and money. And so we have to move on and focus on our target customer.
So
Can I add one more thing?
Go ahead.
Can I add one more thing? I think part of this conversation, that the way we're talking about it, is maybe there's a different way of maybe looking at it, right? At the end of the day, if you want to build incredible products, everyone in your company needs to really understand who you're trying to do this for, why, right? And so this is not a product management, design, research question. Everyone needs that same minor. Right? Everyone needs to be a product person, including, I would say, engineering, manufacturing, your retail staff. If everyone's not clear on that foundational piece, they can't really do the work that they need to do on a day-to-day basis, which, whatever that might be, a product management function or a design function, it doesn't matter. And so I think, instead of saying, is research important, I think we should just talk about, we need a foundational product to, build amazing product. And you need a consistent voice of the customer and someone to really channel that ethos throughout that organization. And if you start splitting it into 8 different product managers, 30 different product managers, there's a very good chance that you actually don't understand the end-to-end of what is really important for your customer.
Well, and the thing that unifies it is what's the mission, right? What mission are we on? And so, yeah, when I look at research and what types of activities we're going to do, is that going to get us closer to that, or is that going to be a blocker even, right? And we'll make those trade-offs, but we have to get online on what the mission is.
But I think what we're driving to here is I think there's a certain necessary pragmatism. You're talking about business-driven pragmatism in the product role, and I think research has a very honest representation of the user, and almost to a fault. You want to do the absolute best representation of the user's needs, and so it's really about what is that point. Bezos says you need to make decisions with, you should be making decisions with probably 70% of the information that you actually need to make them. But I think there maybe is a tension where the research wants to push that further than that 70% to make sure that we're absolutely aligned. From a philosophical standpoint, what does Shopify look like in that context?
So I haven't come into a situation where I think we've really conflicted on that. So I think the other benefit of having a dedicated researcher is they can do the research the 100%, and we can extract what we need for the business goals that we're striving to achieve for that given product. But the amazing thing is we have that extra 30%, and whether that's something that's actually not in my product scope, but it's telling me that this is something Shopify can build because it's going to delight our merchants, that's super valuable. And so our mission, so you're saying to centralize on the mission, and across all of our product managers, we're our mission is to make more entrepreneurs and help them make more money. So regardless if I'm on channels or if I'm on checkout, that's what I'm trying to do. And so the research is valuable across the board, even if we take it to 100%.
So just to take this down a slightly different track, Andrew, I want to pick up again on product goals versus end user needs. And so I'm picking on you specifically because I think across this panel, Wattpad has the most obligation from a product perspective to create a habit-forming product. And in fact, your target audience is teens. And so from a company perspective, you're looking to create habit-forming products for teens. What does your research say in that context in terms of what would be beneficial for your end users?
So yeah, we are interested in creating a habit, not just for teens, but also for an older demographic as well. We do want to engage people with stories and storytelling. And we are very intentional about understanding what values people have. What are the intrinsic motivators? And we use that as a way of really guiding a lot of our product and design decisions. And it really helps to focus the team in terms of what's next.
But is there a conscious pull between the ethical aspects of how much of a habit you want to create in your users versus their end benefits? Because again, research on the sort of A/B testing, you want to talk about maybe Freshbooks usage and funnel flows, et cetera. You can use dark patterns to sign up people who aren't your ideal customer. And research can really help you do that. You can test exactly what signals you're going to be tweaking in people's brains to make them do the thing you want them to do. So how do you balance that conflict? Or do you have an ethical framework you try and put around the research that you do?
Well, it's just you have to ask yourself, like, what kind of company do you want to build? Like, you can trick people into signing up for your funnel, but, you know, if they're going to churn out after because they're not well suited to your product, like, it's kind of a wasted effort. I think, you know, ultimately, if you're, again, it comes back to strategic direction and your business. If you actually want to make money off of your users in a sustainable way, then you need to not trick them into doing that and target the right people because you believe that your product will actually make their life better. So that's kind of just the overarching way that we think about it.
I would agree. I think it's really important, right? Like if you truly want if you want users to like really be attached to like whatever you're doing and like come along for the journey, I think you have to understand that people actually buy into an ethos. They don't buy into products, right? Like it's not a product, it's a promise. And I think it's really important that you lead with that promise and you actually deliver that promise. Because if you're not doing that and it's all about like keeping people like looking at endless feeds, then sure, you might get a bunch of people to come in, but like the value to those users and the value to the society, in some ways, I don't think there's much.
This seems like product actually makes the case for the research. Researchers should be happy about the existence of the product role because if we're driving for outcome-driven products, then we really want to make sure that we're actually going to create the benefits to those users as opposed to, again, just pushing people through funnels they don't want to be. So I'm just going to take it to an anecdote level. Anybody got a favorite research anecdote? Something that they heard and they didn't want to hear, something that actually maybe positively, fundamentally changed the way that they were thinking about the work that they did?
Yeah, I have one actually from one of the first usability tests that I was involved with. And we had been working on this project for a long time. And we brought in the developers to watch the usability testing. And my learning from that is that we didn't really set them up in terms of what they should expect out of the usability test. These developers had poured their heart and soul into this application, and it was being tested behind the glass, thankfully. And they were like screaming at the participants, you know, like, go left, click that button, please, right? And my learning out of that is that there's two responses for being like a vested stakeholder in watching a usability test. You either love it or you hate it. And it's really important that when you are bringing stakeholders in who are being exposed to usability testing for the first time, that you set them up to understand, hey, we're here to find the mistakes. We're here to find the blockers, and it's better for us to find this out now rather than in market.
Cool. I also have one along a slightly different line. So Freshbooks, a couple years ago, basically rebuilt the product from the ground up. And one of the things that we had to build was search. So the ability to search like your invoices, your expenses, you know, all the things that go in the app. And on the team, we all thought that people would want to do a global search. So, you know, you log into your account and on like your dashboard type thingy, you could search, you type words into a search box and all of the things that would relate to that search query would come up. So all the expenses, all the clients, all the invoices. And we did like a simple usability test with paper with real humans. And in one afternoon, we realized that we're all idiots and that no, people don't want to search globally. They want to go to the client page and search for clients and go to the invoice page and search for invoices. And just to kind of, it sounds like a simple example, but bringing it back to the whole risk thing, there's a big technical risk in doing search wrong, like implementing it wrong. In a huge way. And so in one afternoon, we were able to build search properly the first time and get the product out to market in the timeframes that we wanted.
Any more for that? No? I'm going to move on to one. We're sort of running towards closing questions before we take more Q&A from the audience here. So in one word, give me one word that suggests the way that the product role should consider research, and then we're going to dig into the one that has the most interesting word. So one word that implies the relationship between product and research. Abhi?
Lots of words that come to mind.
That's
but
more than one word.
I'll do two, sorry. Insights and inspiration, I think are like two really important things.
Definitely lots of insights and inspiration, great.
Do it faster.
That's 3 words. This is really falling apart. All right, Zabrina.
Essential.
Smarter.
How do we do it smarter, Andrew?
It helps you make smarter decisions. It's about knowing ahead of time rather than after.
So what's something that you could change about your organization, maybe the way it's set up, the way that you integrate research into product development? What's something you could do now moving forward to improve that integration?
Well, I mean, one of the things that's embedded in Wattpad is we have a dual-track agile process. So that starts off with discovery. And because we're an outcome-driven organization, understanding our users and understanding how we drive those behaviors is kind of baked in our DNA. So that really helps to put research at the forefront.
Sabrina, one thing that could improve the way that Shopify approaches the intersection of research and product, beyond hiring another 30 researchers?
How'd you know I was going to say that? So what our research team is doing and what product could do a better job of is they're creating workshops to help teams that don't have an embedded researcher. And as product managers, sometimes we're like, we're too busy and we're not attending those workshops. And so I think us attending those workshops, learning how to conduct those interviews, and even engaging with a researcher if they're not embedded in your team and just asking their advice is what I think we could do better on.
That goes back to that broken telephone game again, which is if there's data and then there's synthesis and then there's your interpretation of the synthesis and then there's your product decisions made on the other side. I do think that's definitely a disconnect that I think all of us in the room can work to improve. Lindsay, something that you can do to improve research at FreshBooks beyond making $1 billion so you can hire researchers?
In terms of what we can do better, I think that to me, it's more about, or at least the things that I'm curious about from a research standpoint that we could definitely do better, is think about or spend more time on our non-customer. So that freelancer that doesn't use FreshBooks, what are they doing and how can we help them? We tend to think about the existing base, I think, a little bit too much, and I think because it's easier. And so if we focus some of our research efforts on the questions that are harder, I think that we'll be able to evolve the product in a much better way.
That's great. Abhi?
Trying to level set everyone, set better expectations of what research is supposed to be, and what should you look for in terms of a research output. There's this tendency to look at anything that research publishes and think oh, the user said that, right? Pick whatever quote you want and turn it into a feature that might work or not work. And so a lot of people are looking for solutions directly out of research versus actually doing the hard work of understanding the larger context and then the areas where they need to actually go further down to really uncover a meaningful outcome, right? And so that part of the education is it's a constant thing. We have to do that on a weekly basis almost.
That's great. I just have one more I want to pick up, and you said do it faster, I think was your
Yes.
statement. And so they say move fast, break things, but when you put the human in this is user research, right? Is this move fast, break hearts? What's your?
I would say move fast and crush dreams.
Hopefully the dreams of the people who manage the payroll by hiring more researchers, better integrating them into product teams, and building better shit for all of our users. So I think that pretty much wraps up our time for the core panel here. Please give a big round of applause and thanks to all of our panelists from today.